All right. Well, good to see everybody. This is supposed to be morning devotions, but let me tell you what happened. My mom called and said, where are the devotions? And this morning I did a whole devotions. It went about, close to 30 minutes. And then when I was downloading it to YouTube, I saw that it was only 8 minutes. And then I said, well, maybe it's another one of those first 8 minutes, and then it dropped off. And that's not what it was. It was 30 minutes chopped into chunks, all jammed together. It was just bumping all the way through until you get 8 minutes worth of stuff. And I have never seen that before. I don't know. I didn't know what to make of it, so I had other things to do today. But I told Annette before I had supper that I was going to do this again. I didn't want to miss today. So anyway, that's why we're here. It's here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's almost 5 o'clock, which is I don't know if I've ever done this at 5 o'clock, but I wanted to get it in for today. So this is episode 192. I posted 2 Samuel verses 19, 1 through 12, and this whole passage is just a demonstration of the muddle of leadership when it gets off the rails. That's what this is all about. I mean, it couldn't get much worse than we're reading here in chapter 19. And it all stems from what happened to David back in chapter, let's see, hang on just a second, back when he had to talk to Nathan, because I don't think David, in his old age or with the problems that he was up against, of his own accord in a natural way, could have caused all of this. This was the muddle that the Lord placed upon him, the curse upon David because of the adultery and the murder. And everything on the inside of David, so to speak, internally and externally in the nation, is just confused and broken. And every verse you read, it's like bad decisions or half decisions are being made. I told my wife this morning that I was going to try to get through the whole chapter, and I think I got through maybe 12 or 14 verses this morning. I mean, all of this I think is important. There's so much to learn from it, so I'm not going to assume that I can get through all of this. All right, we'll do about what I did earlier this morning. Hopefully this will get through. But if you go back to chapter 12, 2 Samuel chapter 12, this is what Nathan tells David, and that's why what I'm saying here is this is divinely imposed on David because of his sin. And I just want to say that this whole chapter, all of this material, is the implications, the ramifications of the sin of David, this one event. And you'd say to yourself, well, it's one event, but it's like you throw the stone into the pond and the ripples keep going and going and going. That no man is an island unto himself. It not only has interrupted David's own life, his own ability to think clearly, but it is also interrupting the whole nation of Israel. And I think, looking at the macro picture of this, that is the thing we need to remember. We're going to look at these details, but this is what sin did in the realm when David did this. So it is just, I mean, I said this morning, I was like yelling at my Bible because I'm saying this is just too much. Every time you turn around, something is going haywire. It's going the wrong direction. And you say, why is all of this in the Bible? And we're looking at all these details, but all these details, if you just put it under the umbrella, are a result of Nathan's curse on David. It says in verse 10, it says, now therefore the sword shall not depart from thine house. He says, it's not going to depart from thine house because thou hast despised me. He says, you've despised the Lord. You knew better than to do this, David. He said, and hast taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be thy wife. Thus saith the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house. And then it goes on. That's what we're looking at here. These are the details of it. And so I say all this when I look at the macro picture, that this is a warning to everyone in regards to the implications of sin, all right? It is just, this passage of Scripture is just verse after verse after verse is just crazy. It just is horrible. And I can see, and I mean, I see the viewership of these things, and I think the viewership in this material is going down because who wants to read this? Who wants to do this for morning devotions? You see, some of it is lively and exciting when David is on the top of his game. But after the sin, I said that right there in 2 Samuel, things begin to decline, and that is what we need to note. This is what we have to anchor ourselves in. This is what's going on. And so let's look at the text here, because when you get into 2 Samuel chapter 19, it begins with this malaise that David is in. And Joab, who is no saint, this guy is he is, I was going to say reprobate. I don't know if he's a reprobate, but he is a scoundrel. He is a scoundrel. Later on here, David is going to ask the general of Absalom's army to take over, Amasa, to take over the army, because he's had it up to here with Joab, because Joab killed his son, and he's already been a heartache to David, right? And he wants to consolidate the nation, so it looks like it's a good political move if he brings on the general of the opposing army. Amasa is his nephew as well, just like Joab is. But in the next chapter, chapter 20, he gets cousins now, I think that's right. Joab gets Amasa aside and kills him, just like he got Abner aside and killed him. This is Joab, all right? Anyway, I'm a little bit ahead of myself, but David is going to try to consolidate the nation. This whole chapter is about a civil war. And this morning I said, we're down here in Virginia. This is the South. Robert Lee was here, the general of the Confederate Army, and we have all the historical markers. You can't drive anywhere where there's a battleground here and a battleground there. And we lived up in Manassas, the first and second battles of Bull Run, and it's interesting to find out all the details of the Civil War. But I could be more of a historian than I really want to be about the Civil War, because the whole idea of brothers killing brothers, it just isn't something that I want to apply myself to. And I'm thankful for the historians that do that. But that whole idea is just something that this is a very, very sad thing. And I just rather read something else, because that is what has happened here. They are in the midst, they had a civil war between David and his son. David's got Judah on one side, Absalom's got Israel on the other side, and they're fighting it out. And it's a miracle. It's the grace of God on the part of the smaller army of Judah that Israel is defeated. And 20,000 men are killed in that battle. Between the battle and being caught in the woods there, it talks about. But after that's over, you can understand when brothers are fighting brothers. This is all within the nation of Israel. This isn't the Philistines or the Ammonites or the Midianites. These are Israelis killing Israelis. And then you got a king here he won't even come outside, because all he can say, oh, Absalom, Absalom, Absalom. People don't know what to do. They're stuck in the middle. And that's what Joab is going to do here in these first few verses. But David has got to get his wits about him and try to consolidate the nation again, because Judah and Israel at this stage of the game, under the reign of one King David, they hate each other. The last verse of chapter 19 is in verse 33, when it says, and the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel. Because the word fiercer here means there are words of violence. These are fighting words. It's like at the end of chapter 19, Israel and Judah are so still at war with one another in their hearts that it says that they're about ready just to kill each other at that moment. And this is at the end of the chapter. And you can see that if you look in the history of our nation, it takes a long time to heal the land after something like this. Well, this is the mess that David, because of his sin, created with Absalom, which is the fulfillment of what Nathan said was going to happen, somebody out of your own family. And now the nation has fallen into civil war as a result of God's curse upon the king. I just want you to grasp this, the power of this. And it all comes down to willful disobedience. That's what all this is about. And all of these chapters in here, you say, goes on and on about how terrible all this is for us to have it hit us in the head like a sledgehammer, that here in this case, sin, but the sin here of adultery and murder, but sin as it is such an affront to God that this is what can happen, especially if you're in a position of leadership. And here he's the king. This is what can happen, All right. And so when you read the Psalms, not to take, purge me with hyssop that I may be clean, wash me that I can be whiter than snow. I mean, and then David says, my sin is continually before me. All of that is wrapped up in this mess. It's an absolute mess because of that. And I've said that up until this time. Once the sin transpires, you cannot put the genie back in the bottle. It is done. And yes, God's going to forgive him, but the implications of it are what we're reading here. So it's important that we hear it. It's important that we embrace it. And it's important that we understand it. This is the way God will, bring your life and the lives of those round about you when it's willful disobedience to adjust into a terrible sphere. All right, that's what we're talking about. So let's look at the text. It says, and it was told Joab, this is verse 1 of 19, and it was told Joab, behold, the king weepeth and mourneth for Absalom. He won't get up. All he's at home is he is in the house crying for his son. He's weeping for his son. He's not going to be the king. He's not being the king. He is so brokenhearted. He is in this malaise. He's in this melancholy mood. I mean, you can't get the king to be the king because of Absalom, which I've said, I don't get this. All right, now he is his firstborn son, and you don't want to lose your firstborn son, but he is out of the game at this stage. David is. And the victory that day, listen to this. This is the impact the king who can't get his wits about him. It says, and the victory that day was turned into mourning. Because there's a time, at victory, there should be the ticker tape parade, there should be the confetti, there should be the band, right? And everybody's rejoicing because the battle was won. I mean, it's amazing. You won the Stanley Cup, you win the World Series, you win the Super Bowl, you win this great victory. It's a time of celebration because when those times come, we should celebrate. We celebrate things, especially here in time of war. You won. I mean, all the great pictures of our soldiers when we won over in the Pacific and in Europe, and the celebrations that were happening here when those guys came back on those troop transport ships loaded with our soldiers and they finally got home. And how wonderful that was. Nah, not here, because the king is acting like they lost. Listen to this. And the victory that day was turned into mourning unto all the people. For the people heard say that day how the king was grieved for his son. And what the king is feeling is impressing everyone. The king is just at home crying and lamenting the death of his son. And the people can't celebrate because the king's not celebrating. And listen to this, verse 3. This is just a stinger. This is the word, the author here is the penman. I don't know exactly who wrote this, but these are the words of the Holy Spirit. And the people got them by stealth that day into the city. There was no celebration. There was no parade. They snuck back home. They didn't want to look like it was a great day because as far as the king's concerned, it was a horrible day. His boy was killed. As people being ashamed steal away when they flee in battle, the victors came home like they were losers. Like they were slinking home so no one would see them because it's as if they were ashamed. Being ashamed. Like those that are ashamed of losing, like they lost against the enemy. And so they come back as the losing army and their countenance is fallen and they're discouraged and they know that they haven't done their job and they lost. And now they just got to kind of get home. And they're trudging home. There's no liveliness in their step. There's no glint in their eye. There's no smile on their face. They're just trying to sneak home like they were the losers when they were the winners. This whole passage is just it's just a horrible thing, because this is all brought on the people because of what David did. And then it says this. Verse 4, and the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice. It's like he's moaning out loud with a loud voice. Oh! This is David who killed Goliath. This is David who killed the lion and the bear. This is David who outwitted the Philistines. This is David who could have killed Saul twice and didn't. This is David. Now he's up in years here, but that's why I said I don't think any of this could be this bad if it was not by divine appointment. Even even in old age, if you want to say, well, he's getting senile here, which he's not, but if you were going to even credit with that, you're saying, oh, what in the world? That's why I said I was yelling at my Bible this morning. What in the world? Except this is what the biblical record here. So with a loud voice, the king covered his face, and king cried with a loud voice, oh, my son Absalom, oh, Absalom, my son, my son. Like the whole world has just stopped because Absalom is dead. And Joab, this scoundrel, he can't take it. He said this whole thing is nonsense. Now that's my version, which isn't worth anything. He's just sick of this, Joab. And Joab came unto the house of the king. He goes to the palace and said, thou hast shamed this day the faces of thy servants. You have shamed everybody that's been there to defend you. The way you're acting. This is unacceptable, King David. You have shamed everybody. And then wait till he says what they did here. Listen to this. He says, you shamed us because we won the victory for you. And then he come back like we lost. He says, thou hast shamed this day the faces of all thy servants, which this day have saved thy life. Listen to this. They didn't just save you. They saved thy life and the lives of thy sons. All your sons, they're alive. Because if Absalom would have had his way, they had all been dead, just like Ammon. The lives of thy sons and thy daughters, and the lives of thy wives, and the lives of thy concubines. That is, your seed would have been wiped out if these folks didn't fight valiantly for you. And you're over here shaming them because all you can think about is your boy, not the fact that they risked their lives to keep you and your family alive. Now, it doesn't say it here, but you know who's in this mix? You know who I'm talking about. You know who's in this mix? Solomon. Yeah, he's Bathsheba's boy. Your boy that's going to, God already says that his favor was pointed toward him. We know he's going to be the next king. He would have been dead too. Yeah, that's what Joab is saying. And then he goes on, he says, in verse 6, in that thou hast lovest thine enemies. He's talking about Absalom. You love those that wanted to kill you and hatest thy friends. You shamed those that gave their lives to keep you alive, and you're more interested in the people that wanted to kill you than the people that wanted to save you. Oh, man. When I've said he's got him by the scruff of the neck, or by the throat, I've used different metaphors. That's what this is. This is this unscrupulous scoundrel Joab just shaking the king, just shaking him. Like, get up. That would be another one of my, that is even shorter than the Message or the NIV. The NIV is longer, but reduced. He just, get up and get going is what Joab's saying. Get your wits about you, David. He said, in that thou lovest thine enemies and hatest thy friends, for thou hast declared this day that thou regardest neither princes nor servants. And then he says this, listen to this, for I perceive, now this is by divine inspiration, I got the idea here, David, King David, that if Absalom had lived, and all we had died this day, that is, if the battle would have been lost, but Absalom would have survived, that it had pleased thee well. I'm under the impression that you really didn't care about any of the people that went to fight for you. We could have all died on the battlefield as long as Absalom would have been alive. That's what Joab is saying here. What an atrocity. What a terrible thing to say. But he's right. Because all he can talk about in this whole idea of, Absalom. Like, it's like he needs to get shook up and get going. Recognize who your friends are. And then he says this, verse 7. Now therefore, arise, get up, and go forth, and speak comfortably unto thy servants. You have been hiding away here in the palace. You have to get out in public. You are the leader of the nation of Israel. You have a job to do. You got to bring Judah and Israel back together. You got to congratulate those that gave or would have given their lives for you. You have to get out there and you have to start talking with these people, and you have to have a generous, thankful spirit. You have to commend them for the work. You have to thank them for all that they have done. You have to encourage the nation. You have to unite the nation. You got to get everything back together here, because right now Joab knows we are divided. And we're not getting any help from the king, who's the only one that can really bring us back together, because you're up here moaning and groaning about the loss of your son. That is what's going on here. Now, I think there's another interesting point here. That Joab is, I keep saying he's no saint, but he's giving good counsel. So a scoundrel and a murderer. He's a murderer. He murdered Abner in a time of peace, and Solomon's going to make sure that he's killed. That's one of the first things he does when Solomon takes the reign as the new king, because he killed Abner, and he's guilty of capital punishment, and that Benaiah carries that out when it comes to Joab here, because Joab is a bad guy. He's the general, but he is a bad guy. But here, about the only person that could do this and get away with it is Joab. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes God has to use the really, really, really rough guys to get things moving along. This guy's no preacher. He's no saint. He's no Livingston. He's no prayer warrior. Far from this. He's no prophet. He's no preacher. He's no apostle. He's no servant of God. This is Joab. He is a military commander, but sometimes God has to use men like that. God uses everything, and that's who he's using here to get David on his feet. Who else can walk in there and talk to him this way? I don't know. I'm not saying there isn't anybody, but in the scripture, God uses Joab here. He says, "Now therefore arise, go forth, and speak comfortably unto thy servants. For I swear by the Lord." Man, he is pouring it on here. "For I swear by the Lord, if thou go not forth," if you don't get up and stop doing this, he says, if thou go not forth, there will not tarry one with thee this night. All the support you get is going to be gone. That's what he's saying. You got to do something. He said, "And that will be worse unto thee than all the evil that befalleth thee from thy youth until now." From when you've been in the sheepcote, and he was in a lot of trouble up until this time. He said, if you don't get up, everybody's going to abandon you, and you're going to be in more trouble than adding all the trouble you've ever been in up until this time, is the way you're going to be, because you are going to be isolated by yourself, and there's no telling. I mean, I'm adding this, but this is what it is inferring. There's no telling what's going to happen to you if you don't get going. Now, we know he does. But he said, this is what's up, because Joab can't take it anymore, essentially what's going on. And then it says this, 8. "And then the king arose and sat in the gate." There he is. He's back on the radio. He's back on TV. He's back doing interviews. And he finally got out of the house. He got out in the public. And that is where leadership needs to be. Needs to be in the public. Not hiding in your bedroom. And crying. That's not it. Lamenting. Get out there. And so he's sitting in the gate, which is where all the business was done. That's just a term for all the business is done. And the people are going to find out that David is out in public again, so they're all going to rally to him. It says, "And the people were and the king arose and sat in the gate, and they told unto all the people, saying, Behold, the king doth sit in the gate." He's out. He's not just hiding. So, and the word's getting along here. This didn't take much. Okay? He said, "The king just sit in the gate, and all the people came before the king, for Israel had fled every man to his tent." And this idea of Israel here and fleeing to your tent is, you can speak of Israel broadly because everybody has gone back to their tent, but I think the emphasis here is that the losers went back to their tents because they don't know what's going to happen. It would be like what happens now after the Confederacy loses to the North. All right. And now what's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to us? That's what's going on here. There is fear because it's a civil war and you've ended up on the wrong side. So what's going to happen next? And it says, "And all the people were at strife throughout all the tribes of Israel." And there it is. Yeah, because just because the battle's over doesn't mean that there's not this tension and this angst, this anger that exists because of what happened. These guys from Judah just killed off my dad, my brother, my uncle. We just had this terrible battle. They got stuck in the woods and they killed him while he was my family when they're there. How are we ever going to mend this? You see, this is just too much. It's too much. This is what David has got to bring about. He's got to bring the consolidation of the nation, and he does. All right, he does. But this is just trying to get the ball rolling. Up until this time, it's just been a muddle, a malaise. No leadership. This is what happened. I was filling in for a church without a pastor Sunday, and I told him this was one of the most difficult times, going to be one of the most dangerous times for the congregation, because if there's no shepherd, the sheep are scattered. That's just what happens. And they kind of looked at me like, with his glazed face, because they've only been without a pastor a couple of weeks. But the fact of the matter is that's what happens. If there's no shepherd, the sheep are scattered. But, sheep and deacons think that they don't need a pastor. That's the thing. They think that they can do what a pastor does without being called or gifted to do it. You see it in their eyes, like they're really self-confident, until they realize how tough it is in this day to find a pastor who really teaches the word, or how willing are they to compromise to get a man in the pulpit because they've looked and looked and looked and can't find anybody, so what do you settle with? This is what is in that church's future. All right, that's what we're talking about here. And this is a perfect Old Testament example of what happens when you have no leadership. And then there's infighting, but there's nobody to resolve it. Here we go. He said, and then it said, and all the people were of strife throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, the king, now this is David, has saved us out of the hand of our enemies, and he delivered us out of the hand of the Philistines, and now he has fled out of the land for Absalom. This is not what anybody expected. He takes on the biggest enemies in the ancient Near East that take on Israel. They never ran him out of Jerusalem. The Jebusites never ran him out. The Philistines never ran him out. The Ammonites never ran him out. The Midianites never ran him out. Edomites never ran him out. And all the rest of the ites there that he had to conquer never ran him out. But his boy did. That's what they're saying. What happened to this guy? I told you. There is a real issue of confidence in the king here. He's got to step up his game. And I say all this because I'm getting down into the bits and pieces of this passage. But let's go back to what I said when I started. What I said when I started is the macro picture is this is the implications of the curse on David because he did something that he knew was wrong. He took another man's wife and he had the husband killed. And here is what happens. And I am doing this to say, we're looking at all these details, which is just, it's horrible to say that you got to go back to chapter 12 and say that once the stone is thrown in the pond and the ripples begin, the ripples will go places that you never imagined. That is what sin will do, especially here for the king or anybody in position of leadership. That's what we're looking at here. It goes on. He said, let's see. And then he goes on, he said, Absalom is dead, who was anointed over us is dead in battle. Now, therefore, why speak ye not a word of bringing the king back? What they're saying is, who's in charge here? And let me see. Let me slip down here. Let's see. Verse 13, and then, because I'm out of time again, but verse 13, this is Amasa. You should read the commentators. Some say it's probably not a good idea to bring the general of the opposing army on, but David is trying to consolidate things, and others are saying it was like a political maneuvering of a genius to show consolidation. Besides, he doesn't want Joab as the general anymore. He doesn't want him. I mean, he's the one that killed Absalom. He's already given him grief. All right, he already killed Abner. The Bible already says he was a heaviness, that Joab and Abishai were heaviness to him. I mean, so what a perfect time to dump Joab and bring on another general. And that's what he does here. And some of the commentators say this was something that was good to consolidate because the people would say, well, he's thrown Joab out and he's brought in the commander of Absalom's general to lead the army of the consolidated nation again. And then it said, verse 14, and I'm going to stop there. He said, and he bowed the heart of all the men of Judah, even as the heart of one man, that they loved him. That's the point. They all united as one heart behind the king. Judah did. Now that's the key. It says Judah did. Even as the heart of one man, they were consolidated behind him. Well, he's David. They won the victory, so they're on the winning side, and now they're united. They're united. At least those of Judah are united, so that they sent this word unto the king: return now and all thy servants. All right, because of these things that he had done, they say, yeah, come back, and let's get things rolling along here. That is not the tribes of Israel. That's going to take some work. All right. Well, I'm going to stop there. Lord willing, this got through. So he is still on the other side of Jordan when all this takes place. All of this. He's still on the other side of Jordan. He's going to take a ferry across the Jordan River. He's going to come back into the land, back to Jerusalem, and then he's got to deal with the things that are coming up next. Oh man. I'm going to do this in however long it takes. My wife says, you just should take the time on this because, I'm supposed to keep these things to 20 minutes, and I've been doing it like a chapter at a time. But these chapters, that's, what is it, 43 verses. So I'm gonna just deal with it as I am led to deal with it. But we'll just stop there. So the Lord bless you. Lord willing, see everybody tomorrow. All right, and we'll press on here in 2 Samuel chapter 19. All right, Lord bless you. We'll see you. Yep. Okay. Bye.